Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello once again to the latest podcast. Today I'm quite excited to have Don Brown sitting next to me. Some of you would have heard of him before, being a finder and specialising in Auckland apartments. I think Don's been working with apartments, either renovating and doing his own things and finding apartments for other people for as long as I have been a sort of finder for. So he's very experienced in this field. Don has just recently started with us at Property Ventures, and we're very pleased to have his expertise on board. So today, because we've had quite a few requests from people about apartments in Auckland, we're just going to discuss a few things with apartments in today's market and what to look out for and what you can expect. So we'll welcome Don along, and we hope you enjoy the next half hour. So welcome along, Don.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for inviting me along, and hopefully we can have a good general chat about the apartment market, and hopefully we can answer some questions that the listeners might have out there this morning.
Jolly good. Just so to just quantify, so people know, how long you've been doing this for and your experience. How long have you been sort of trading apartments for, or assisting other people in Auckland for?
I started looking at inner city apartments around 2008, 2009, when they were getting so much bad press about then. A lot of people were bought into blue chip properties, and a lot of them were being sold, and I just thought that there must be some sort of an opportunity there. Like most people did, I got some sort of basic mentoring knowledge and also trial and error, I guess, and around that time started buying a few properties and joint ventures with other people and by myself, and started trading properties back then.
Great stuff. So it's a few good years, and there's been some very good years of buying apartments, I suppose, from that 3 to 6 or 7 years ago. So that's really good. Hey, not really what we're going to talk about today, but just sort of, I suppose, a couple of wee hints from the expertise you've had from your renovating. What are some tips on renovating apartments, probably that are different from renovating normal houses?
Renovating an apartment's quite a simple exercise. You're not responsible for the roof, you're not responsible for the outside walls, you're not responsible for the lift or anything like that. Of course, the body corporate takes care of those things. The only thing that you need to tidy up and renovate are the interior of the apartment, and it just basically consists of a few rooms, some windows and some fixtures and fittings. So the actual cost is quite minimal, and the difference you can make can be quite huge, and it doesn't cost that much money.
I like that, from doing a lot of renovations myself, and the exterior can certainly cost you a heck of a lot of money, and by having no responsibility for that as such, I guess, is massive when it comes to renovating apartments. And I suppose in the ongoing maintenance, keeping these things certainly a lot less than the other. So down to the nuts and bolts with renovating apartments, what really is there, and what do you have to try to do and organise?
It's quite a simple procedure. You have to make the property look bigger and allow as much light in as possible. Generally, an inside an apartment will need repainting. For some reason in the past, darker colours were popular. Some even have maroon and dark coloured walls. You get rid of all that and paint them a very light colour, some sort of derivative of white. You also more than likely will need to replace the carpet. It's high traffic in a small area, it wears out quickly. Occasionally you need to do some tiling and a little touch up on the cabinetry work in the kitchen. Replace the current window blinds, vertical blinds, with something more modern. Usually the roller blinds are great because they let in the maximum amount of light. Replace all the light bulbs with the highest amount of light that you can get, like cool white or something, the maximum amount of wattage. And just generally a bit of tidy up. Sometimes some extra storage is good. That's quite a cheap way of adding value. But the most key point probably is to furnish an apartment. People who live in the city don't want to be lugging furniture up and down in the lift and taking it from one property to another when they move. So by furnishing an apartment and kitting it out well, and I mean everything, right down to bed linen, teaspoon, electric jug, TV on the wall, everything. By doing that, you get the maximum return, you get the best tenant who will pay the most amount of money, and your apartment will appeal to that top 25% in your category, and that's what you want. You want the best tenant paying the best rent, managed by the best property manager. It's a simple formula, works well, and doesn't cost an incredible lot to increase the rent, sometimes between $100 and $150 a week from what was previously being returned.
I can totally relate to that because I'm sort of on the other side at the moment this year, been living in an apartment and looking at apartments from the rental side of it. And yeah, light is certainly an issue with many apartments. So I take that on board for getting as light as you can, and windows. And I suppose if it doesn't have many windows, bright lights is the best way around it, is it, Don?
Yes, other than not buying those ones.
That makes sense. And also, I'll just say on the furniture side of things, I ended up renting an apartment. Again, it was fully furnished, right down to the last knife and fork and what have you. So that certainly helps the process.
A lot of people ask about buying a car park, and they think they'll get a higher return by having a car park, but the actual key is to putting furniture in the property. If they furnish it, the return is very similar to having a car park, and the difference is car park might cost somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000, whereas the actual furniture package can cost between $4,000 and $6,000 for an average two-bedroom apartment around 40 to 45 square metres. So the return on furniture package is huge.
Yeah, and that makes total sense from the Christchurch studios and apartments and townhouses. We're looking at the same thing. That by spending 12 or 18,000 on furniture, depending on how big you get, you're getting a massive return on those on it, and it's certainly worthwhile having. Okay, Rob, we just want to talk about apartments. Just so what sort of areas of Auckland would you say you're specialist in, and purely is it apartments or other bits and pieces as well?
I basically specialise in the inner city because that's where most of the apartments are in Auckland. And in actual fact, the inner city of Auckland has the highest amount of apartments of any city in the country. They vary, of course, from small 9 square metre, one bedroom typey places that there are in one building up until very large. I think the largest apartment could be 300 or 400 square metres. The ones that we tended to work in was often in the studio or the 1 and 2 bedroom sizes, varying from 18 to approximately 50 odd square metres.
Yeah, 18 square metres, not very big, and people quench a little bit at that. We'll come on to that, the difference in sizes later on and what that sort of means. Let's expand about the sizes of apartments now, Don. So tell us what the importance and what sort of different type of clientele you might have in a different size of apartments.
Yeah, sure, Mark. The smaller apartments generally tend to be student accommodation. There's a lot of students go to the university in Auckland, and of course the language schools. Those apartments are often the studios, which are in the 18 to 24 square metre size, and typically the smaller 1 and 2 bedroom apartments up to around 45 square metres. They tend to be student accommodation. When we're getting above in the 40 to probably 60 square metres, it can still be rental accommodation, but maybe someone who works in the city, maybe someone who has a office job or white collar job, someone who even might have a property somewhere else they go to in the weekend and live in the city rather than commute. And when you get to the larger stuff, typically 70 square metres up to whatever, it's probably starting to become owner occupier. That's becoming quite common now as you get older people selling their homes in the suburbs and giving inner city living a try. They obviously will like a larger apartment, and also first home buyers are coming into the city and buying the medium-sized apartments that are in quite nice buildings or well located with car parks, because it's cheaper than buying a house in the inner city suburbs where the prices are now well over $1 million. They can purchase a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment with one and sometimes two car parks for probably half of that and still be living in the same area.
Right, yeah, that makes total sense. And I suppose alongside with the size of apartments, it also is where the apartments are around town will demand, I suppose, what sort of tenants you might get in there.
Yes, most definitely. The ones located in the streets near the university tend to be students, but not necessarily 100%. They may also be people who work in the city. There's a lot of people work in the city, working in restaurants, casino, all sorts of jobs, office work, and it's just an easy walk from almost all of the apartments to somewhere in the city to work.
Yeah. Okay, well that's great sort of for what sort of tenants you get. Now, one of the other things you have to be very aware of with apartments and the size of it, I suppose, is the lending. And I know you're not a mortgage broker, but what's the difference? How's that affect people, investors, when buying their apartment? The difference between a 30 square metre and a 50 or 80 square metre apartment.
Yes, apartment lending is a little bit different than a regular house in the suburbs. It seems that banks in general don't lend as much if they're under 40 square metres. In some cases, that could be 50 square metres, depending on which bank it is. And when it's below that level, they seem to have different rules, which can vary from they'll lend 70% and even as low as 50%. If the apartment's larger, they tend to treat them more like a regular house in the suburbs, and they will lend 80% on the larger ones. But you definitely have to check with your broker if you're looking at buying an apartment, because the rules are totally different.
Yeah, and that's what my experiences are with every bank has slightly different rules. So you certainly go to your bank or your broker to find out before you buy at auction for an apartment. But just other factors then with apartments, Don, it is a bit of a more specialist, I suppose, investment than a 3 bedroom house somewhere else. What sort of things should you look out for? Obviously, there's body corps and the likes. What do you look out for mainly when you buy an apartment in Auckland Central?
You need to obviously check out body corporates. You're right there, Mark. You need to make sure the body corporates are well run, the building's been managed well. It's desirable to probably have an on-site manager. A lot of cases that is the case. There are some that aren't. You have to make sure that they have money put aside for long-term maintenance. It's just the same as if you own a house in the suburbs. You need to allow to repaint the outside of the building and replace the roof and so on and so on. So a building needs maintenance. So you have to make sure that the owners of the building are each year putting some money aside for future maintenance, whether it be fixing the lift or even just washing the building. Auckland's a seaside place. There's a high salt content in the air, so buildings need to be washed regularly. All those sort of things. So one of the things is the building well managed. Is there an on-site manager? Because that's an advantage. And do they have money put aside for future maintenance? And do they have a long-term maintenance plan which they are working to?
Yeah, no, that's important, and that's probably where some people have been caught out with newer builds. They haven't had a long-term maintenance plan in the body corp, and then they have had a sudden rise later on. Leaky buildings has been, or leaky apartments as well, has been a bit of a swear word around investors in Auckland over the last sort of 5 or 10 years. Obviously the apartments had a bad rap. What's sort of going on with apartments? Are they still leaky buildings, or if one's been fixed or repaired, is it still a good investment to go and buy one of these?
Yeah, a lot of the so-called leaky buildings have been identified, but in saying that, there have been a couple of new uh, projects that have come up recently. To buy into a leaky building, of course, the building won't have any consent, so you'd have to be a cash buyer, and that's probably not an option for a lot of people. But someone who does have the available funds, there are some buildings where they've actually put in place a plan to fix it. They know what it's going to cost, and they're working to a plan. There is a window of opportunity for an investor to perhaps buy into a building like that, because there won't have been any recent sales. The prices in the building will probably be depressed from the current market, and you know what you're going to have to pay to complete the process of fixing the building. So yeah, at the end of the day, you could come out of that with a cheap 1 or 2 or 3 bedroom property that the market will be far above that when it's got new code of compliance issued.
Yeah, and I suppose people like yourself who are in the apartment game all the time, you actually become aware of or find out before others when there is a good deal, maybe when it's getting near the end of fixing a problem up with the building, and maybe there's some people bailing out and you actually can pick up a deal. I suppose that's probably one way to get a deal in the Auckland apartment market now. Would that be right?
Yeah, I guess that's an opportunity out there. Of course, as I said, you'd have to be a cash buyer and also be well aware that there is a bit of risk involved, but it's been minimised by the fact that everything's been put in place to fix it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, if you're actually sitting there and looking to buy an apartment now? What are probably the key 2 or 3 things you really want to look for? I mean, you've already alluded to some of them, I guess with the making sure the body corp runs well. What would just be a couple of the overall key points?
In the existing stock, I'll be looking for an apartment that's sunny and light, got a good outlook. Tenants seem to respond well to a nice outlook, so I guess in the higher levels of a building is desirable. Well located, so pick an inner city building, so there's more options for tenants, and a well-run building, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now the apartments obviously gone up like the rest of the Auckland market, no different than the rest of it, I guess. Probably slower than some and faster than others. And it's only your personal opinions, but where do you see the market at the moment, and what sort of yields or gross yields can you get now? And does it depend on what size it is?
Um, the market's been moving in the inner city for 2 or 3 years now at a reasonably good pace, probably around 10 to 15% each year for the last 3 years, and currently it's still doing the same, which is very similar to what's happening in the suburbs. The gross yields have gone down as demand has increased. When I first started looking in apartments, there was approximately 2,000 or just over 2,000 on Trade Me on a daily basis for sale. I think I looked this morning and there was 451. So the demand is higher and the amount of properties available is a lot less. So therefore the yield has come down from what we could expect even 2 or 3 years ago. I would think if you were getting 7 to 8% gross, it would be quite a good deal. And the net, of course, is depending how you work out the figures.
Right, and in fair, that's no different than the rest of the Auckland market. We're still hoping and think they could get 7.5% gross yields, 8% gross yields a few years ago, and obviously a 6% gross yield is a pretty good yield now in Auckland. So yeah, I suppose it's just constant with the rest of the Auckland market.
Yeah, probably one of the good things about apartments is the total value is less, the entry price is less, and the deposit is less. So if you were going to buy a 2 bedroom unit somewhere in the suburbs and it's going to cost you 600,000, your 20%'s 120,000. So if you're buying a $250,000 or $300,000 apartment and you had to put out 20%, it's only 60 grand. So there's a big difference. So the entry point's less, and the deposit, depending on lending criteria, the bank will probably still be a lot less than your unit in the suburbs, and the return will be. You can probably still buy apartments and have a neutral return, and maybe even just slightly cash flow positive if you're lucky.
Yeah, and that's certainly the attraction, I think, for a lot of people. It's, as you said, it's less entry value, and you're still in the mighty city of Auckland that's getting the great gains in property. In fact, just on I suppose give an example of properties we probably know better than actually we're listing one this week. You've actually found there. Just talk about that, just as in not so much of the sales pitch, but more of just comparing that with what with what we've been talking about. It's about a $310,000 purchase, I think.
Yeah, sure. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. It's in the favourable bank lending criteria of over 40 square metres, and it's the 10th floor of a building. It's north facing with a sunny outlook, a good nice city view. It actually has been renovated. Sarah, my partner, and myself renovated this for the client about 2 years ago, and we did exactly what we mentioned earlier on, what you need to do to make them look nice. It's currently returning $480 a week rent, so it's got a good return, and it's got great tenants who, according to the property manager, pay the rent on time and look after the property. So it's exactly what you should have.
And what sort of tenants will that sort of place generally get, or that building generally get?
That building's located in an area where the tenant could be a student, or it could be someone who works in the city. I'm not sure which category the tenant fits into.
Okay, great. And the body corp's only quite low on that one, isn't it?
Yeah, this particular building, the body corporate, is mid 2000s, around $2,300, $2,500, which it's a well-run body corporate. They have money set aside to do their maintenance, and they're doing those things, and it's just well run. They don't waste money on stuff, and they manage to keep the price of their fee each year low per unit, which is great.
No, that's great. And one of the things about Body Corp, I mean, people go, it's one of the worst sides of having apartments, but all it is actually it helps, as Don alluded to before. It's actually you don't have to do the maintenance on the outside of the building. That's done for you. So that's paid, it's cleaned, it's what goes on. So you don't have to have your maintenance bills not as big as when you have a normal 3 or 4 bedroom home in the suburbs.
Also included in the body corporate is the insurance in the building.
Course, yeah.
So if you own a house in the suburbs, your insurance bill is probably $1,000 or more per annum. That's already included in your body corporate. And of course, per apartment, the rates in the city will be a lot less than a typical house in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Typically, rates in an apartment could be between $800 and $1,500, depending on where it is and how big it is, but a lot less in the suburbs.
Yeah, so embrace your body corp. don't fight it.
Oh yeah, no, they do a good job.
Yeah. Just to finish up, obviously there are other apartments around Auckland. There's North Shore and Manukau. What are the main differences between the sort of three markets? Is it?
I think the apartments built in the past, especially in the inner city, were aimed towards investors who would buy them to probably rent them out to students and or people who lived in the city and worked, versus probably stuff on the North Shore and new builds coming up in Manukau and places where they're more aimed at owner-occupiers, or perhaps an investor might buy it and rent it to an executive or that type of tenant.
Right. Okay, so the main differences are really who's going to live in them, and the prices are generally consistent. What I've seen around all three areas, would that be pretty well right?
I think so. There's reasonably good demand, and yes, the prices are very similar.
Okay. Was there anything else you want to add before we sort of finish this up? Just any final comments on apartments?
Only that if you're out there and you're looking for an investment and you're having a hard job to scratch enough together to buy a typical house somewhere, you probably should consider an apartment. It meets a lot of people's buying rules, and the returns will probably definitely be neutral if you buy right. And just if you apply those key things, tidy them up and renovate them, put good furniture in them, they can be rented to the best people for the best money.
Yeah, no, definitely, absolutely. As long as it fits those buying criteria, you're in the Auckland market. That's great. So, so we welcome Don along to the Property Ventures team here, and not only a nice bloke, but great expertise in the Auckland and particularly the apartment market. So, Don's here. You can talk to him, as you said, any time about it. We're having a few more Auckland stock on board, which I'm sure you will be happy about. And if you're just after an apartment, we can, give you to Don for our buyers agency service, and he can get you into the market. So thanks for your time to Don. Thanks for talking.
Thanks, Mark. Much appreciated.
Yeah, we're very pleased to have Don on board. He's very experienced in the field, and I'm sure will help many of you in the future. So you're welcome to the team, Don. I hope you have a very successful time here, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Remember, if you have any topics that you want us to discuss, let us know, info@propertyventures.co.nz, and we'll try to get someone on that you want or talk about what you want to hear. Happy investing to you all, and we'll catch up next week. Take care.